all of us people have a moral responsibility, have a democratic responsibility to prevent a nightmare outcome for our country. And that is the EFF getting anywhere near the national government. We all must do everything possible, everything we can, to erect a kind of cordon around the EFF and prevent them from getting anywhere near government. That would be a catastrophe for our country, from which it really is questionable whether it could recover.
Well, it's about time I had a catch up with Geordin Hill-Lewis, the mayor of Cape Town. We've been following his story from the time that he stood for election on a basis of ending load shedding in the mother city. Well, we've now at stage 6 load shedding here in South Africa, which means 10 hours a day we have no electricity. I don't know why they call it load shedding. I liked what Richard Quest had to say, that it was power outages, and let's just call it what it is. But we'll get an update now from the Mayor of Cape Town, who's done a heck of a lot in pushing through a new deal for South Africans on electricity production and absorption. And I mean that, Geordin. It's you really have done a lot. You stuck your neck out right from the beginning. The president in the city hall of Cape Town looked at you and almost said, well, he's the guy who's giving us the most uphill, but he's actually doing the right thing. So the courage that you had early on to say, well, we're going to take on these stupid rules. I remember you saying that if the door opened a squeak, you would kick it in, and indeed you've done so.
Thank you very much, Alec. It's really nice to join you again. Yeah, we have done so because it was obvious to us at the time that Eskom was not going to fix this. And as much as Mr. De Ruyter has tried, and it has nearly cost him his life, he is now on his way out. One shudders to think, who would be brave enough or perhaps dumb enough to take that job after him. There's no way that Eskom is going to get itself out of this mess. We're going to have to do it ourselves. So our insight remains exactly the same as it was a year ago. And that means if we are going to do it ourselves, that we have to do it as quickly as possible. Given, as you said in your introduction, we are today sitting with stage 6 blackouts. Let's not call it load shedding. It is blackouts. And that should be an outrage to every South African.
10 hours of the 24 hours, and it could get worse still. According to De Ruyter, this year things aren't going to get better. He's looking at it getting better in 2024. What about Cape Town, though? You've been in the mayoral office now for coming up for 18 months. You did a campaign on the basis of getting rid of load shedding for the mother city. What's the progress?
So we are 14 months in now, and all 4 of the major legs of our load shedding program are underway. 3 are in fact already complete. So the first is that we bought 200 megawatts of power from IPPs. That was renewable power. That tender was out within 3 months of the election. It's concluded. We are contracting with the winning bidders, and after contracting is finished, they can go away and start construction. That's 200 megawatts. The second is we said we have to change our policy on so-called embedded generation. That's businesses and homes owning solar panels and generating their own power. And we said that you can now generate as much as you want. Previously, we used to say that you had to be still a net consumer of power. We now say you can be a net producer. You can produce as much as you want. And that excess that you produce, we will actually buy it from you for cash if you want. That's a major policy shift. It's the first place in the country and one of the first cities that I can tell on the whole continent to have done that. And then third, we said not only wealthy households that can afford solar installations should benefit. We launched our Power Heroes program so that any household that saves power during peak times of the day will be rewarded with cash incentives for saving power. Essentially exactly the same as selling us power, freeing up additional capacity on the grid at peak times. And then the fourth one, which is really about to go to the press and about to go out to the market, is the big one, the 500 megawatt procurement for so-called dispatchable power that should be released in the next 3 weeks or so. Those are the four legs, Alec, and all of them are well on track. And once they come together, then we can say goodbye to blackouts. And I really look forward to that day.
Just put it in context, 500 megawatts dispatchable power. Maybe unpack that a little and in the context of what the city of Cape Town uses.
We use about 2,200 megawatts of power at peak times. And so this is not designed to get us entirely free from Eskom. That's a common misconception. I would love to cut our ties with Eskom, but not yet. That'll take some major power procurement over the next few years. But this is designed to make up the load shedding shortfall. So when we have stage 5 load shedding, Eskom insists that we cut 500 megawatts of power from our city grid, and that that's the instruction we receive, just like every other city and town in this country, and we have to do that. And unless we can make up that shortfall ourselves, we have to have load shedding. So this procurement is designed to make up that shortfall, and that's why it's called dispatchable. Dispatchable is just a term that means it's available as and when you need it, literally at the flick of a switch. So the trouble with renewable only is it's only available when the sun is shining or when the wind is blowing. Once you combine that with storage, either pump storage or battery storage, it becomes dispatchable in that you can use it exactly when you need it.
So you'll be letting us know about that in the next few weeks, but clearly discussions are well advanced.
They're basically finished. As I said, that tender, we're kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's on that tender. We want to make sure that it is not subject to legal challenge and all of the many things that hold up government tenders. So we are trying to be as thorough as we can with our due diligence before we release it to market, and that's why it's gone through some extra legal steps. But we are now basically ready to go.
Which brings in another point of discussion, and this is something that we have been exploring with DA members or DA leadership heading into the 2024 election. On the one hand, you can show the rest of the country that the Western Cape works, Cape Town works, cities where you are in the municipality works, and that's really good and a big tick. On the other hand, being this island of efficiency and prosperity in a nation of great turbulence and problems can bring its own issues. Talking with your Premier, the Western Cape Premier, Alan Winde, recently, he says that the semigration to the Western Cape continues to grow and is now well over 100,000 people a year. At some point in time, surely that is going to become or make the demand for resources in the area, and in particular in your city of Cape Town, very difficult to meet.
Yes, that's absolutely undoubtedly true. And anyone who visits Cape Town can see that is the case. There's tremendous pressure on our infrastructure. Traffic is now back to pre-COVID levels. In fact, it's probably above pre-COVID levels, particularly in poorer parts of the city where densification is happening the most. You will see pressure on our sewage grid, on our sewage infrastructure, evident in many parts of the city. And what we have not done, while Cape Town has invested quite handsomely in infrastructure over the years, actually, if you track, I wish I could upload the graph for you. If you just track infrastructure investment over population growth in the city, you will see that we have not kept pace with the growth of our population. So it's a slightly different problem to other cities that have not been investing in infrastructure. Here we have been, but not at the requisite pace. So we've said we want to accelerate infrastructure investment. That's the only way to cope with the problem that you've outlined, Alec, is to invest in infrastructure at a pace faster than the growth of density and population in your city. So we've set out a 120 billion rand infrastructure plan for the next decade, most of it going into water infrastructure. You know the problems with water in Cape Town, and sewage infrastructure because of that density. And then, of course, some public transport infrastructure and energy and so on. But it really is a massive acceleration. Just to give you an idea, we are growing our infrastructure budgets by more than 110% from last year to next year. In the space of 3 financial years, we will more than double our infrastructure investment and then maintain it at that level for a decade. So it's really big stuff. And that's not always the kind of most interesting thing to talk about, but it's to your question, goes to the absolute heart of what makes us able to cope with the pressure of urbanization and densification.
How's it funded?
Well, this is the blessing that we have, unlike my colleagues in some other cities who I really feel for. Cape Town has had a long period of political stability and a long period of very well managed finances. We have little or next to no debt on our balance sheet. And now that we want to accelerate, we actually can accelerate and fund it all. If you wanted to do the same kind of acceleration of investment in Johannesburg or Tshwane or Ekurhuleni, you'll really struggle to pay for it all, or you'll raise funding but at extremely expensive rates. Here we can fund it all internally or through debt that is new to our balance sheet and at very good rates.
Yeah, the benefits of good governance. On the other hand, though, and you have been outspoken against the Russians, we had a
Yes,
fascinating discussion with R.W. Johnson, who said that the Russians are going to do everything in their power, which is considerable, to make sure that whatever government comes in 2024 does not include the DA. Now, I know you've also said, and maybe you can just elaborate on that a little bit, that you feel that the DA could go into coalition with the ANC after 2024 if it keeps the EFF out. But if the Russians have already said they don't want you guys there, and RW, who knows a lot about these things, Irina Filatova, his wife, is
yes.
Russian and an academic from Moscow. She says well, he says it has been noted in Moscow how the DA has been siding with Ukraine
Ah,
versus Russia, etc. So you're on you're on their blacklist, as it were. So maybe in that context, this idea of the DA and the ANC having some kind of a coalition post 2024, if that's off the table, what next?
well, let me first say I didn't hear your interview with RW, but it gives me great joy to know that we have been mentioned in dispatches in Moscow. We've poked a finger in the eye of Mr. Putin, and that's fantastic. I was tempted to say that I was thrilled that the Russian warship was here, because every day it's spent here, it could not be in the field of battle. So we were making our contribution in some small way. But it's just before I get onto coalitions, our position as a country, the position taken by the national state in this conflict has been a moral disgrace. It has been an international source of shame for our country. And I'm very proud that here at the southern tip in Cape Town and the Western Cape, Alan has done the same, that we have just stood up for something. Not that we have been able to do a great deal practically, because we don't run the harbors and we don't run the military and so on, but at least we have been able to show South Africans who are ashamed and show the international community who must be bewildered and bemused by our shocking position that there is a different point of view in South Africa. So I'm very proud to have done that. Then to your second question, look, I was speaking to the Mail and Guardian last week, and I said something which I felt was logically self-evident. It ended up being quite a controversial thing to say, and it struck me that perhaps the time is still too soon for a discussion around post 2024 coalitions. That the focus now should just be on trying to strengthen our hand as much as possible and winning as many votes as possible for the Democratic Alliance, which is what I am hard at work trying to do here in the city of Cape Town. But I will just say, one thing from which it's kind of my logical point of departure, from which my other points that I made last week flow. And really, it was underscored by what we saw happening at the State of the Nation speech, that I think everyone in South Africa who is democracy loving, who is freedom loving, who is patriotic, who loves this country and wants to see it succeed, all of us people have a moral responsibility, have a democratic responsibility to prevent a nightmare outcome for our country. And that is the EFF getting anywhere near the national government. We all must do everything possible, everything we can to erect a kind of cordon around the EFF and prevent them from getting anywhere near government. That would be a catastrophe for our country, uh, from which it really is questionable whether it could recover. So that really is the point of departure. That's almost more important than any other outcome. Is preventing that outcome. And so that's really the most fundamental point I was making. What that looks like, you know, that is up for negotiation after 2024. We must have the strongest possible hand that we can, and to do that, we must win as many votes as we can.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point that you've made, because were that to be the situation, were there to be an ANC EFF majority after 2024, then logic says as well, self-evident, that the Western Cape, which is well governed, would have some irresistible pressure for secession. We won't go there now, but you can understand that there are many people who live in the Western Cape who say we don't want this, we won't have it visited upon us. So there are all kinds of issues. But I guess, Geordin, the big story here was in the Economist Intelligence Unit, where South Africa's rating was pulled down really badly by the apathy of voters.
Hmm.
And what we are seeing is that the level of people who go to vote, despite the major issues that happen in our country, or if you like, a watershed election that we're going into, is so low that we now have democracy itself under threat, according to the Economist Intelligence Unit. What are you guys doing? What is the DA doing, or in particular in your ambit, in your circle of influence, to bring out the vote in 2024? Because I guess as long as there are more people voting, then at least you know what they're voting for and what they're choosing for the future of South Africa. But if they stay at home, we're all in the dark.
Yes, I think DA voters have been tremendously loyal and enthusiastic about turning out, for which I'm extremely grateful. In 2021, I don't know where you were on election day in November 2021, Alec, but there was a massive storm in Cape Town, slightly reminiscent of today, actually, where it's pouring outside today. But it was one of the rainiest days I can remember in a long time, and the queues to vote in Cape Town were just as long as ever before. People standing there drenched, waiting several hours for an inefficient rather IEC to let them cast their ballots. So that was really great to see. But the challenge you set out is absolutely correct. There are many millions of voters in South Africa who used to vote for the ANC, who now just don't vote anymore. They stay at home on election day, and they have not yet been prepared to consider another party. And I would, of course, love them to consider our party, the party that I represent here in Cape Town. And I see it as a big part of my business and a big part of my job to make it more uh, acceptable, palatable, attractive for them to do so here in Cape Town. So I really do think we have an important part to play in our national political agenda, and that is to show that the DA governs well for everyone, that everyone benefits from our good government, whether you are poor or whether you are better off. Everyone benefits from the context in which government works, and investments are made and services are delivered, and that in fact this is the best place to build a life out of poverty and get into work and into opportunity. And so, that's a very important part of my mission here, and one I take very seriously.
The prospectus is well shown and is being appreciated around the country. It's just a question, I guess, if people are going to say, well, it can be done here. And perhaps that's your biggest challenge as the Democratic Alliance. Going into 2024, though, we hear from Gayton Mckenzie that he's going to be challenging for the city of Cape Town, and that the Patriotic Alliance won't just be challenging there, but in the whole of the Western Cape government. Given what his influence and his role has been in Johannesburg, which has been pretty disruptive and
Yeah.
certainly siding with the ANC, are you taking that as a serious threat?
Well, I read his message, his outline of his 5 principles or his 5 priorities, and was in turn slightly appalled and concerned about how many people might be taken in by such a overtly populist and quite radical message. So, of course, you have to be concerned about the fertile soil for that kind of populist message in South Africa. There's lots of poverty, there's lots of desperation, there's lots of crime. So, of course, there is fertile soil, but the message itself is it really is appalling. Also, there's a trustworthiness problem. I think, besides the message, Gayton now suffers from a serious trustworthiness problem. Who can trust someone who has handed the Johannesburg, the most important city in the continent, and the biggest metro economy in the whole continent, has handed it back to the ANC not once but twice in the course of the last year? That makes him fundamentally untrustworthy, and I think voters will punish him very severely for that.
Just to close off with, when you arrived in office after November 2021, you were a bit of an unknown factor for many voters. You're young, you're enthusiastic, you're energetic, you promised a lot. Now, what are the polls telling us about your tenure? I.e., if the election were to be held today, would you anticipate, or do the polls tell us that you would get a bigger majority than you did receive in 2021?
Yes, so from what I've seen, and I must stress, I don't often see Cape Town polling. I don't like to uh, be guided by polls. I like to be guided by instinct and what I think is right. But I have seen occasionally polling, and it does look very positive. I think we would get a much stronger majority if there was an election today. And the good thing is we get an opportunity to test it next year, not in a local government election, but in the provincial election. And I will be putting all of my effort and all of my time into helping Alan Winde get re-elected as Premier of the Western Cape. And it will be nice to see what contribution the city of Cape Town and our voters make to that effort, because I think we're gonna show a very strong showing.
Geordin, just reflecting on what we spoke about earlier, getting back to the key issue on load shedding and with everything that's coming in, when will the city of Cape Town residents, ratepayers, be seeing a benefit from the efforts that you've put in? I know it can't happen overnight, but how far are we away from a practical result?
Alec, I have used the time frame of 36 months as a guide to when all 4 of those legs that I took you through earlier will be in place and will come together to stop load shedding. And I think we are still on track for that time frame. Any opportunity that we can find to speed that up, of course, we will grab with both hands. But the fact is, most of these new generation projects have to be constructed. They have to be built. And you can't end load shedding without new capacity on the grid. That's just a simple formula, and that is the way that you get new capacity on the grid. You have to build new capacity, and that takes time.
Geordin Hill-Lewis is the mayor of Cape Town, and I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.